and welcome to each and every one of you to meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Communities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are all aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few points to follow. First off, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, as always, the committee clerk and I will do our very best to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Members, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 29, 2020, the committee will now continue its study of targeted infrastructure investments. I would now like to welcome and introduce our witnesses for today's meeting. First, we have from the Alaska Alberta Railway Development Corporation, Mr. Jean-Paul Gladu, President, Canada. Mr. Sean McCoshen, Founder and Chairman. As an individual, we have Shoshana Sachs, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering at the University of Toronto. We have from the Canadian Urban Transit Association, Marco D'Angelo, President and Chief Executive Officer. And finally, we do have from the city of Sept-Îles, Régent Poirier, Mayor. So with that, we're going to start off with Jean-Paul Gladu and Sean McCoshen. I'm not sure which one of you are going to be speaking, but you have 5 minutes and the floor is now yours. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, and such an honor to be invited to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of this committee for having us this morning. My name is Sean McCoshen, and I am the chair and founder of the Alaska to Alberta Railway, known as A2A Rail. JP Gladu, as you've already introduced, is joining me today. We are here to talk about A2A Rail and to offer our thoughts on the process of developing infrastructure in Canada. Our perspective comes from 5.5 years working to build A2A Rail, a low-carbon, multi-commodity railroad that aspires to be the largest Indigenous co-owned project in the world and will bring immediate and long-term economic opportunity to Canada's north. From its inception, 3 objectives have been central to A2A's DNA. 1, meaningful Indigenous engagement and ownership of the project. 2, setting a new gold standard for sustainability and environmental impact. And 3, opening a reliable and long-term pathway through the Yukon and Northwest Territories into Alaska. I founded A2A Rail because I saw the potential and the need for a project of this kind. In fact, when I first learned there was no rail connection into Canada's Northwest, I was astounded. Through this work and throughout my career, I have engaged with international investors, many of whom are looking for opportunities in Canada. While many of them tell me that there's a bit of a chill on building large-scale infrastructure in Canada, I believe the one way to prove them wrong is to show the world that we can build large-scale infrastructure in this country. At A2A Rail, we feel strongly that successfully building the kinds of projects this committee is studying means designing a project in the exact way we have designed our railway, placing environmental considerations at the forefront of planning, engaging Indigenous communities, not simply in the planning process, but as owners and partners in all phases of the project, lowering the cost of living for communities in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and opening Canada's north while deepening Canada-US connectivity. That is the kind of project Canada should be building right now, and we can absolutely do this. A2A Rail can be a model for how big infrastructure projects in Canada are built going forward, and success through Canada's regulatory process for projects like ours that is designed with these elements at its core will go very far to encourage significant new investment. Pass off to JP to do right now.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm actually calling in from the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. And I'm actually First Nation from Northern Ontario, Sandpoint First Nation. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be working on this project with Sean. I've known Sean for many years, and his passion for this work is palpable. Our entire team is proud of the way that ATA Rail will be built. We've conducted extensive engagement with communities along the route. But beyond that, we're also in the process of reaching a number of equity agreements with our Indigenous communities. In fact, I was on a call, two calls today, one with a community in the Northwest Territories and one in Northern Alberta. And we've got communities all along the route that are incredibly excited about this opportunity. The communities we engage we're seeking their input, as Sean mentioned, very early on. We flipped the process on the head. We strongly believe that in the Indigenous communities, and when they're on board, projects see a larger opportunity for success. We are going to serve as a vital transportation network in the north, and the economic opportunities that come along with it has the potential to unlock $60 billion in cumulative GDP throughout 2040. The ancillary benefits throughout also include fiber optic connections. And I can tell you, one of the things that Sean's been quoted in the press is the $8 bag of Doritos that he's got to pay when you go up north. I'm being a little bit facetious there, but the opportunity to reduce the cost of northern living for communities along the route will be transformative. A2A will also set a new standard for sustainable development, as Sean has mentioned, with 100% offset of all operational emissions and an explicit focus of designing a sustainable railway where safety, environmental protection, and Indigenous land preservation remains at the forefront. We believe our approach at A2A Rail is the right thing to do, but it also, because it reflects the priorities and the needs of our country right now. We really do sincerely appreciate the opportunity to present to you today, and we look forward to your questions for further discussion. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. Well done. We're now going to move on to Ms. Sachs. Ms. Sachs, you have 5 minutes.
So thank you very much for having me today. Thank you to the chair and to the members of the committee. My name is Shoshana Sachs. I'm a professor of civil and mineral engineering at the University of Toronto and Canada's research chair in sustainable infrastructure. What we build is the foundation of our society. It's the best expression of what we value and what we envision for the future. Transportation infrastructure in particular is the skeletal structure of all of our other infrastructure systems. Transportation influences where we live, where we work, who we travel, how we travel, who we meet, what opportunities we have in our consumption, and it drives how much pollution we make. In Canada, transportation is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, second only to oil and gas, which is also largely about transportation. 13,000 Canadians die every year from air pollution, which is also largely driven by transportation choices. For scale, in 2 years, this is more people than have died so far from COVID. The impacts of our transportation pollution disproportionately impact the young and those who live near busy roads, meaning it's an important question of both current and future equity.
Monsieur le Président, la traduction.
I can't hear the interpretation, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what the reason for that is. Perhaps it's something to do with the microphone. Perhaps a witness could just move the microphone a tad closer to her mouth so that the interpretation service can resume.
Thank you, Mr. Brassou-Duval. Mr. Clerk, what's the problem over there?
Yeah, I think the interpreters are having a problem with the signal that's coming through. It's the sound degradation is just a little bit too much, so they're not able to provide interpretation.
Why don't we, Ms. Sachs, if we can have the microphone that you're using just sort of above your lip, above your top lip. Just yeah, I was hearing a popping sound there, and that could be the problem. So if you can just have it above your top lip, not right against your skin, you can just kind of hang it there, like a mustache there. So that's what we're always told by the interpreters. If we can try that, and Mike, if you can just keep an eye on it and see what happens. We only have a few minutes here to get through, so let's see how we can let's see how we can go here. And Mr. Brosso-Duval, hopefully we can get the interpretation for you. All right, Ms. Sachs, go ahead, continue.
Thank you. Hopefully this will be better. The consequences of our transportation are not unavoidable things about modern society or economy. They're an echo of our infrastructure choices, particularly 70 years of single-minded focus in building around the car. Going forward, there are three things we need to do to improve the equity and sustainability of our transportation infrastructure. First, we need to stop making things worse by moving away from investing in fossil fuels and automobile-oriented development. We need to invest in no new highways, no road widenings, no extensions of our current automobile infrastructure. Highway construction incentivizes low-density, high-cost land use. It pushes more people to drive further, and it permanently damages farm and natural land necessary to resilient systems. For a long time, we thought of roads as being key drivers of economic benefits, but for a long time now, they've been very low return while maintaining very high costs. Second, we need to invest in low-tech, low-carbon, low-cost infrastructure now. We have all the tools we need to build sustainable development. We don't need any new inventions. Two of the best tools we have are largely underused in Canada, building infrastructure around the bicycle and around the bus. We can do this rapidly, we can do it affordably. It's accessible to all. And once we've done it, it tends to be very, very popular, as been shown in cities across Canada and around the world. Finally, we need to be big and ambitious about our long-term projects, but these will take up to 10 years or longer to build, like subways or fast intercity rail. And for this, we need to establish forms for stable long-term planning and long-term funding. A lot of infrastructure in Canada takes decades to deliver, and we've talked a lot in the public discourse about cutting the red tape, making things go faster. But a huge driver of what's making our projects slow is the time it takes to get them to the starting line, the time it takes to make prioritization and to get dedicated funding. So in summary, going forward, I hope that we will see more in Canada of more infrastructure that doesn't prioritize the car, more focus over what we can do now with technology that works really well, like investing in bicycles and buses, and more long-term planning for our infrastructure systems with dedicated funding. Thank you for your time and for your patience with the tech trouble, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Don't take it all that personal. This is a normal thing that's been happening for the past year with our new norm when it comes to committee work, and of course all the tech that we rely upon. And I have to give a lot of credit to the interpreters because they do their best with what they have. So it's ongoing. It's become the norm. So don't take too much offense to it. And great work. So now we're going to move on to the Canadian Urban Transit Association. Mr. D'Angelo, you have your headset all set to go, I see. And you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me. Today, I'd like to talk about three things: the state of public transit, the benefits of investing in it, and some features of existing programs that prevent funds from reaching communities in need. Commençons par l'état de transport.
Let's start by the state of public transit. With folks working from home or studying remotely, ridership has freefalled. At the same time last year, it had dropped by approximately 85%, and it's now reduced by approximately 60%. But that still means that over 2 million people rely on public transit each and every day. They are more than likely to be low-income earners who live too far from work to be able to walk or go by bike. But their income is too low to be able to purchase a vehicle. There are a lot of seniors and disabled persons that carry out essential services.
Shopping for groceries. Public transit is a social enabler. We give people access to employment and education. Before the pandemic, about half the cost of running transit came from the fare box. And so if we're going to keep service levels so people who rely on transit can get where they need to go, ongoing financial support from government is going to be needed as funding through the Safe Restart agreements are beginning to expire. Nous ne pouvons pas laisser la mobilité.
We can't allow urban mobility to become something that only serves those who have the means. It should be available to everyone. And this can only be achieved through public transit. Now, that's the operational side of things.
Infrastructure classes, building public transit creates the most jobs. For every dollar that's invested, $1.50 of economic activity is the result. It's also a key way to meet our climate goals. I think about before COVID, when public transit reduced emissions by more than 14 million tons a year, like taking 3 million cars off the road. Et plus nous développons.
And the more we develop public transit, the more we will be able to connect communities, and the better we will be able to combat climate change.
So supportive of the Permanent Transit Fund that will take effect in 2026. Predictable, stable funding will let transit systems plan. And this will be of most benefit to larger rail-based projects in our biggest cities. If we get the details of the fund right, this will be transformational. We'll be releasing our paper soon with recommendations on how to do that, and we'll make sure every member of the committee gets a copy. Before wrapping up, I want to address one other issue that we're studying today, and that's ensuring infrastructure investments reach communities. We have large regional discrepancies. In the 4 largest provinces where provincial governments take advantage of available federal funds, transit gets built. But in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, in the Atlantic region, provincial governments for the most part do not. Over the first 6 years of the Investing in Canada infrastructure program, the 6 smallest provinces only use 15% of the available federal funds. In some provinces, even lower, like 5%. So as a result, over the last 5 years, a lot of Infrastructure Canada's budget has been unspent. I hope the Permanent Transit Fund will address this issue. We think there are ways that it can. One way is adopting proven features like the Community Building Fund, formerly known as Gas Tax Fund. Il associe efficacement.
This is a good way of spending program funding because it brings municipalities to the table.
By flowing funds through a provincial agency. Another way is by recognizing that one size of a program doesn't fit all. So what works in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver is not going to necessarily work in Moncton and Brandon. And so to help smaller projects in smaller communities get built, we think the Permanent Transit Fund should have a baseline stream. So an amount that every system across Canada will receive, whether or not the province is able to match that. That would help communities and provinces that traditionally don't invest in transit to get their projects built, while continuing what's already working well, where larger provinces are keen partners with the federal government and municipalities. Merci encore de m'avoir invité.
Thanks again for inviting me here today.
You have. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo. Great job. We don't have Mr. Porlier, the mayor of Sotillo, online. He's having problems connecting, so I'm going to go right to question. Mr. Barceau-Duval, you had a question?
Oui, mais je voulais juste clarifier.
Yes, just a point of clarification. It was my understanding that he wasn't able to connect, but that he was able to communicate with the clerk or IT in order to join us by phone. Is that the case or not?
Mr. Clerk?
No, they have to actually connect through the Zoom meeting. We can't have we don't have a phone in option at this time. IT is on the phone with them right now, and they're working the problem. So hopefully they get them in soon. Otherwise, we'll have to have them back next week.
Okay, so we're going to start off with our first round of questions, 6 minutes each. We're going to start off with the Conservatives. Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. My questions are for Mr. Gladue and Mr. McCoshen of the Alaska to Alberta Railway Development Corporation. A couple of years ago, the federal government brought in Bill C-69, which adds a considerable amount of overhead to major pipeline and resource projects. And that law would also apply to the building of the Alaska to Alberta Railway. Can the witnesses speak to the effects of Bill C-69 on major projects in Canada and on this railway proposal in particular?
Carmen?
JP, do you want me to take a crack at this one?
Absolutely, Sean, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, we're going to be the first major project to go through this new process. The new process emphasizes Indigenous consultation. And new scares everybody, but you know, the changes were made to address the current realities of climate change that's affecting all of us in this day and age. So it, there are some streamlined effects as opposed to the old bill. There are some additional um, steps that you must take, but it's something that you have to go through. You know, it's always difficult when you're new, you know, to something. You know, you're sort of being the precedent setter, but it is what it is, and it's something that we're looking forward to getting involved with. We are currently we have a draft in front of the IAA of our process that we're going to be going through. They're working with us. They're tremendously supportive, and that's what I have to say on that. JP, do you want to add anything?
Well, for the most part, you know, the challenges in the country with regards to garnishing certainty around any kind of infrastructure project, the projects that are successful are the ones that have strong engagement with Indigenous communities, and we've taken that a step further. And I think if you take a look around in any infrastructure projects on Crown lands, there's a strong equity portion afforded to communities for their well, for their support. And we're seeing a lot of great success. Communities are stepping into that space, and that should help alleviate some of the challenges that we will face as an organization going through the IAA process. Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Okay, well, yes, a major component of Bill C-69 is Indigenous consultation. Can the witnesses expand on the Indigenous consultation that they have done or plan to do with respect to the proposed Alaska to Alberta Railway?
Gentlemen?
Do you want me to take that, John?
Sure. Massive. JP is president of Canada, and he runs something that we like to call the NET team, which is the Northern Engagement Team. It's arguably the biggest budget. A2A spends several millions of dollars a month on this in terms of engineering and consultation. Those are the two major components at this point in time that will move into environmental once we officially submit, which we're anticipating in around June or July, depending on how the consultation goes. It is constant engagement. It's transparent engagement. You simply have to discuss all sorts of aspects of the project, such as the where the line is going to run, where the communities would like to see the run. They tend to have a better knowledge of their land than anybody else, so it's a wonderful resource, and we're very, very grateful for that resource. JP, you head up that team, so take it away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my past experience as the president and CEO for the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses set me up pretty well with the communities as far as having pre-existing relationships, but can't rely just solely on that. It's being transparent and open with the communities. There are 22 communities, primary communities that we are engaging with on a regular basis. Unfortunately, due to COVID, there's a couple of communities that have just signaled to us that we're just taking our time because we can't get our communities together. But I can tell you there's not one community that's pushed back to us. They have regular concerns that normally come up around wildlife and water issues, which are all very mitigatable with regards to the best environmental and safety standards that we have. But it's just constant and open, transparent conversations with the communities, and we're making significant progress considering the short amount of time we've been at it.
Mr. Graham?
Okay, and so environmental impacts are another component of Bill C-69. And I understand that the Yukon and Northwest Territories have large caribou herds that migrate across the north. What can be done to protect the caribou herds that migrate along the proposed railway route?
Gentlemen?
There's several things that are being done. We have a master agreement with the Alaska Railroad. We're partners with the Alaska Railroad. So in effect, we're already operating up north. And some of the mitigation practices we're getting from them. We're also looking at mitigation practices that were in the Middle East in order to preserve camel herds. You have certain amounts of bridges that you could build specifically for wildlife. You can have a kind of an angular approach as opposed to just straight lines, which tend to confuse the caribou. All of this is under development with engineering, but it's going to be substantial in terms of how little impact we're going to have once this is built. JP, do you want to add anything?
The only other thing that I would add is that, this is a multi-cargo rail line. Bitumen will be part of it, and part of, meeting the highest standards and offsets and GHGs. That we look at actually surcharges to support, for instance, the Indigenous Leadership, the Guardians program, green energy projects. Just to go back to having Indigenous people that are on the ground all the time, helping us direct the way that we build this project, understanding where the caribou movements are, understanding where to put gates, where to put overpasses. There's technology along the line that can actually signal to trains and to actually animals of oncoming trains to create noises, as an example, to scare caribou. So we're looking at all the technologies. There is a lot out there, and we will implement everything we possibly can because it's important to our Indigenous partners and it's important to us.
Thank you, Mr. Gladue, and thank you, Mr. McCoshen, and thank you to Mr. Cram. We're now going to move on to the Liberals. We have Mr. Alkuri. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et bienvenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our guests. My question is for Ms. Sachs. Ms. Sachs, you're a civil engineer, I understand. I'd like to talk about social infrastructure. Our government has adopted our existing programs to meet the needs of communities in these difficult times of COVID-19. We've made municipal and provincial buildings eligible for the new COVID-19 Resilience Fund. Minister McKenna has already approved hundreds of projects as part of this stream, like renovating hospitals and schools and other facilities. Could you please talk about how important that social infrastructure is and how we should ensure that all orders of government work together in service of Canadians from one coast to coast?
You're on mute. Once again, happens to all of us.
Thank you. I was just listening to the end of the translation and then I was on mute. So thank you very much for the question. Social infrastructure, as we've seen over the last year and a half, is particularly important to how we function as a country. We need good hospitals, we need good schools. We also need the ability to reach them. So it's been exciting to see the announcements of new funding for new infrastructure over the last several months. But there's still a lot more we need to do. I'm hoping to see over the coming years more investments in infrastructure projects that combine multiple functions. Traditionally, we have looked at our social infrastructure, things like schools, community centers, sports fields, police stations, as single-use projects. As we move forward to the challenges of the 21st century and increasing competitive nature of our use of land, more people needing more things and less space, I'm hoping to see us develop putting more things together. So a school that's also a community center, that's also on top of it, places where people can live. A police station that's not just one floor, but has many uses in the same location. This is one of the biggest improvements I'm hoping to see in social infrastructure in the coming future. But also a question that applies to social infrastructure spaces as well as all infrastructure is how can we repurpose what we already have to deliver more effectively on what we need. The things that we needed 50 years ago when we built much of our infrastructure are quite different than what we need now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Mr. O'Kerry?
Ma deuxième question.
My second question is directed at Mr. Angelo. Mr. Angelo, social inequalities in our communities have only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. How will investments in infrastructure help to address these systemic inequalities?
Mr. D'Angelo?
Merci pour la question.
Well, thank you for the question. For folks who live too far away from school or from their place of work in order to be able to walk or to go by bike, and whose income is too low to be able to purchase a car and drive, as I said in my brief, public transit is their only way of getting around. So public transportation is crucial to many seniors, disabled persons, and in fact for everyone that does essential work on our behalf during this pandemic. So public transit enables many folks to access both employment and education.
Say that many transit systems across the country have assisted in supporting vaccination programs, retrofitting their buses, bringing our vehicles to where people need them while connecting folks to essential jobs. So what we don't want to have, and what we have avoided in the transit industry, and that is a nurse after a 12-hour shift wondering if the bus will be there on time, or a grocery store worker finishing their shift, will I be late, and what will happen? Transit has had their backs throughout the pandemic. Thank you.
Mr. O'Kerry?
Yes. Monsieur Angelo, vous parlez dans votre...
Mr. Angelo, in your remarks, you talked about combating climate change. Here's my question for you, and perhaps also for the other witnesses. What do you see Canada's future as being, given our government's commitments to support green infrastructure? Do you have trouble seeing clients, particularly those in the private sector, who have difficulty understanding and getting a handle on these recommendations? Will this change their opinion? And could you tell us how to change their opinion?
Angelo, a short answer, please.
Okay, merci. Avant le COVID.
Well, thank you. Before COVID-19, public transit reduced emissions to the tune of millions of tons of CO2 emissions. This is the equivalent of 3 million cars, and public transit also reduces urban congestion and urban sprawl. And now I'll allow the other witnesses to chip in on this answer.
Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo. Mr. O'Kerry, your time is up, so I'm going to go on to the next witness, and hopefully if other witnesses had some comments to make on that, they can make it within their answers to other questions.
Merci.
So with that, thank you, Mr. O'Kerry. With that, I'm going to move on to Mr. Brasseur-Duval. Mr. Brasseur-Duval of the Bloc Québécois, you have 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Mr. D'Angelo. Earlier in your opening remarks, I found it interesting when you said and compared the use of the infrastructure funds by the different provinces, where some provinces are not as urbanized and the populations aren't as dense, and that some money has been left on the table. And perhaps the same might occur within jurisdictions, such as within Quebec, which is a sprawling province where there are, of course, metropolises, but there are also small towns and cities where there isn't much public transit. So in order to provide, how do we provide public transit services for those folks and also ensure that money isn't left on the table?
Mr. D'Angelo?
C'est très important.
Well, it's absolutely crucial that all communities have access to the federal fund, which seeks to increase public transit. And I'm really glad to see that the federal government has been negotiating for some time with the province of Quebec as far as the best way of providing programs is concerned. Now, the Community Investment Fund funds are divvied up by a provincial body.
You can just step in for a second. Interpretation, we're getting both English and French at the same volume. FYI.
Same fault. Wait. No. Just.
I'm sorry. I think it's my fault, says Mr. D'Angelo. If I could just pick up where I left off. So, thank you. Thank you very much. And my apologies. I was on the interpretation channel. Now, the federal government has for some time negotiated with the province of Quebec the best way of rolling out programs. And it's absolutely crucial for smaller communities to have access to the same funds as big cities do. So we have taken no issue with a similar arrangement being put in place with a provincial body or organisation in Quebec that would earmark funds and divvy up those funds and distribute them among smaller towns and cities in order to help those folks who live in those small townships. Well, thank you very much for your response. Just a follow-up question. I'm not sure if this is in your bailiwick, but I'd like to hear your input. Oftentimes in remote and far-flung communities, well, when there is a road that joins these communities and the major cities, the federal government seems to then drop the ball when it comes to infrastructure needs. Now, it's not going to help fishers just because a road has been built. There needs to be other infrastructure put in place when you're thousands of miles from urban centres. You might need an airport, for example, not just a road. So have you considered air travel as public transit or even travel by boat?
L'avion?
Well, no, not air travel. We're focusing on buses and also rail travel, but not by air. But that's an interesting idea. And we're in the process of having discussions with the infrastructure department in order to determine what all the rules are when it comes to the $250 million fund for small communities. Now, if air transportation is the best option, I'm not sure whether it is myself, but we are more than willing to come up with and develop solutions that involve buses and rail passenger transport for small communities. But to my mind, it wouldn't necessarily be air transport. Others might disagree. Well, thank you. Obviously, air passenger transit is more polluting than other modes of public transit, but when you are thousands of miles away from an urban centre, sometimes travelling by bus might be discouraging for some people, especially if it involves an emergency. Just a quick question for Ms. Sachs, if I may. In the Bloc Québécois, we often are afraid that the federal government uses its power through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, for example, or other ways, in order to circumvent environmental rules by saying, well, this is a federal program and we don't have to honour the provinces and municipalities' environmental rules, and we're just going to foist our project on small communities and sometimes even bigger communities. Do you think that can be a problem when it comes to infrastructure development?
Ms. Sachs, if you can just hold that microphone just above your top lip, that would be great. Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. It's a tough one to answer because it depends on the project that we're considering. And there's often a tension in between local needs and goals and wider community or national needs and goals, which need to be balanced. The federal government has a responsibility to speak for all Canadians And sometimes that can put it in tension with a local desire around infrastructure. We, for instance, see this sometimes in rail projects where there could be a lot of benefit for the rail infrastructure, but it has large impacts on the local community. So yes, I think that is an important impact and one that needs to be taken into account. But especially for national scale projects or things that are important at a scale larger than community, we need to be careful to balance the ability of a local community to veto something that is very important.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Thank you, Mr. Barceau-Duval. I have to say, Xavier, I'm doing my best to learn French, and today is the first time I heard the French word for bailiwick. So thank you for that.
Le bailiwick.
For the NDP, we have Taylor Bachrach, MP Bachrach. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin my questions with Mr. D'Angelo. And thank you to all of our witnesses for their opening remarks and for the questions we've heard so far. Mr. D'Angelo, could you spell out for the committee how serious the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic have been in terms of transit ridership across Canada?
Absolutely.
D'Angelo.
Okay, thanks for the question. Good to see you. In terms of ridership, I mean, at the lowest point, we were down about 80%, I would say, with a mix of bus kind of holding steady, but commuter rail really seeing the biggest drop. There was a rebuilding of ridership during the summer and the fall of 2020. But again, as restrictions increased during the winter and now into the spring, that's having an impact on ridership. It's going to have an impact on municipal budgets going forward. So I'll stop there in case you have another question. I want to take all your time.
Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, last time we spoke, you were describing some of the long-term risks that this presents for transit authorities, that it's not as simple as canceling routes and laying off staff and then hiring them back and rebuilding the routes, that there can be a downward spiral that can have long-term or permanent impacts on transit systems. Could you help the committee understand what those risks look like?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've been able to avoid is a downward spiral, and I think that's been important by having essential workers continue to use our service. Also, even before there was a safe restart agreement, our transit agencies across the country went out on a limb to ensure that we provided 80 to 90% of service across Canada so our essential workers could get to appointments or work, also to avoid crowding, also to exceed health protocols. We're very proud of our record and what we did before provinces and the federal government were able to deliver the safe restart, which we're very grateful for. And we knew they would come to a conclusion, but it's our mandate to make sure that we never let our citizens down, and we did not.
Mr. Bachrach.
So obviously those safe restart funds have been critical in terms of maintaining transit services in the face of declining ridership or less ridership than usual. I understand that for some transit authorities, they see the end of those safe restart funds. They see those funds running out in the not too distant future. How urgent is that situation, and how important is it that the federal government seriously consider allocating additional funds for transit operations?
Well, it is very important. I mean, last year, all transit systems were in the same boat, if you will, meaning that they needed operating funding. And through Safe Restart, there was a series of bilateral agreements between each province and the federal government. Each has different expiration dates. And so it's really, I think, incumbent on the provinces and on the federal government to work together to make sure that operational funding continues until ridership is close to, if not at pre-pandemic levels. And we're willing to reach out and work with any government, whether it's the provinces or in Ottawa.
Bachrach.
I think a lot of us were pleased to see the announcement around the Permanent Transit Fund. That's something that we in the NDP have been calling for a long time. We were a bit surprised that the Permanent Transit Fund doesn't actually kick in until 2026. From your organization's perspective, would it be beneficial to move that date up and begin the Permanent Transit Fund so that municipalities and transit authorities have that certainty as soon as possible?
Well, on behalf of my members, I mean, it's something that's been a long time goal. that we achieved the permanent transit fund. We're very happy we did that. I'm glad there's a date in the calendar, 2026. And certainly that is also when ISIP expires, where I'd like to continue our work of our association, and that's bridging those two programs so that we can maximize building back better out of the pandemic, creating jobs for Canadians as we come out, and also increasing mobility options, respecting the people's pocketbooks coming in to the pandemic will be different than how they came out, and having the right to get around your community is something that we think is very important.
Mr. Bachrach?
Last question for Mr. D'Angelo is talking about the operating funding model for transit. Historically, transit has been funded through a combination of fare box revenue and municipal contributions. In the pandemic, obviously, federal funds have been really critical in keeping transit running. From your perspective, is there a long-term role for the federal government in funding the operations of transit networks across Canada?
Well, certainly the role of the federal government in terms of supporting capital, I think that's agreed upon. In terms of operational funding, so far, our members and the federal government are, I think, aligned quite well in seeing us through COVID-19 and the end of that pandemic. After that, I think it'll be very interesting to see how transportation trends go. So I can't commit to on behalf of the federal government, I certainly can't commit on their part. But I know that our members, which provide transit across Canada, we will be very interested in maintaining high service levels. And if that means help from the national government, we will look at that.
A couple more seconds there, Mr. Chair. How am I doing?
You have like 10 more seconds.
Okay.
You can wish us all a Merry Christmas. How's that?
It's a bit premature, Mr. Chair, but I like how you think. I did have a question about what it's going to take to restore ridership, but perhaps I'll wait till the next round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Members, we do have online now, we have Régent Poirier. Régent is the mayor of Sept-Îles, and I would like to give him an opportunity to give his 5-minute introduction remarks, and then he can jump in for the questions with everyone else. Mr. Mayor, is it great to have you aboard? If you want to unmute yourself, I'll give you the floor for 5 minutes.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, hello everyone. Sorry, we've been trying to connect for over an hour. Long live technology. Well, I would like to begin by thanking the committee for allowing me to make this brief speech, which will argue for sustained funding for infrastructure and optimal road and air transportation to the regions. Now, it is clear that we have failed in our responsibility to dynamically occupy this vast territory, this vast land that is Canada. The concentration of populations in large cities and the landmark investments in these cities to constantly expand the transportation networks to the detriment of so-called remote, far-flung regions such as the North Shore and Quebec have, in my opinion, only accelerated the exodus of populations to these major metropolises. The last few years have seen several shameful paradoxes. The first is, without a doubt, the exponential increase of ever wider highways, contributing to a mushrooming in the number of cars on the road, which is largely responsible for the climate change that we claim to want to combat. Another paradox is that while these urban networks were being overbuilt to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, the only road link between Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador was never completed. And then we question why there is an exodus in the first place. I hope one day to see this important economic corridor established, and that it will lead to an increase in population density in those areas. Now, just imagine for a moment all those children who, for many years, have suffered from isolation, missing out on many long-term, long-planned outings, or even simply witnessing the impact of this isolation on the health of their loved ones. How many of them do you think will want to go back to that isolation after they've graduated? Now, while we wait for the day when our governments will finally decide to complete Highway 138, putting an end to this isolation that has lasted far too long, and see this resilience turn into dynamism, well then the last remaining hope is to see an adequate air service. So where are we at with that? Well, generally speaking, air transportation in Quebec is anything but efficient and accessible. The current transportation is more of a hindrance than a development tool for the regions. And what is being proposed will not lead to ridership by the greatest number of people, but maximum profit for the airlines. Now, there's another paradox, and that is generous subsidies maximise the profit of private companies and do not focus on promoting real accessibility. It's even worse for the lower North Shore, where, in my opinion, the services are very poorly structured. The services should be federally regulated in order to promote economies of scale through the use of larger aircraft, thereby reducing the cost of tickets. Now, today, the service is so inadequate that it will be impossible to see the development of tourism in this exceptional region. In a report commissioned by the Assembly of MRCs of the North Shore on air transportation, it became very clear that we need to break out of the old paradigms and develop innovative solutions such as a cooperative model where clients become the owners and have a stake in the quality, reliability and accessibility of the service. This report was appended or attached to a brief on regional air transportation submitted by the City of Sept-Îles to the Aviation Committee, comprised of Mr. François Bonnardel, Quebec Minister of Transport. Moreover, there's currently an initiative in Quebec for the implementation of the cooperative model, the TREQ co-op, which should come to fruition this summer. In short, there is no doubt in my mind that in order to meet our government's stated goal to dynamically occupy our territory, we must first complete Highway 138 and finally link Quebec to Newfoundland and Labrador. It is counterproductive, smacks of a lack of vision, and will further delay this work, which is hampering our development. Not to mention that the longer we wait, the more we are likely to watch helplessly as one village after another disappears. Canadian government should take serious interest in the study commissioned by the Assembly of North Shore RCMs on air transportation and in the report produced by the Modern Economy Research Institute, IREC, which has laid out innovative and promising solutions. I hope that I didn't read too quickly, Mr. Chairman, but thank you for your attention.
Great job, Mr. Mayor. You were just fine. We're now going to move on to our second round of speakers. We're going to start off with the Conservatives. Ms. Cusi, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to all of our witnesses for being here today. I'm going to go back to Mr. Gladue and Mr. McCoshen to pick up where my colleague left off. I was curious as to what the timeline is for submitting the Alaska to Alberta Railway project description to the federal government and hopefully getting the project approved.
Gentlemen.
Thank you for the question. I mentioned earlier we're looking at a June, late June, July application going in. And depending on our consultation with Indigenous communities on the route, that's going to dictate essentially how long the process will take. I mentioned earlier in C69 was sort of designed with sort of some advancements on the old bill, but it was also sort of designed to have meaningful consultation. And that's essentially where we're at right now, and that's driving the process. So once that's done, we're gonna submit. And like I said, we're shooting for about June. JP, do you want to add to that? I mean, the NET team is kind of handling that more than I am.
Yeah, the Indigenous engagement and consultation will play a big role. The last thing we want to do is submit and then have communities oppose without the time and effort required to make sure we get the buy-in that we need with our partners, our future partners. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. I would think if you're going to lay down 2,000 kilometers of railway tracks, it must be very cost effective to lay down fiber optic cables beside it. Can You please speak as to the cost savings that could be had by bringing high-speed internet access to the Yukon and Northwest Territories alongside the railway, Mr. Gladue and Mr. McCushen.
Sure. I mean, as you construct, it's very inexpensive to lay fiber optic. That's already in the engineering plan. So along the route, we will have fiber optic capabilities, and those lines can branch out to the communities and the municipalities that are along the route.
Ms. Cusi?
Mr. McCushen, as my colleague mentioned, you've been quoted in the media as once having paid $8 for a small bag of Doritos in the north. That leads me to a couple of conclusions. First, you must really like Doritos if you're like me, a Cool Ranch. And secondly, the cost of groceries and food security must be a constant struggle for the people of the Yukon and Northwest Territories. Can you speak to how the Alaska to Alberta Railway will improve food security in the Yukon and Northwest Territories, please?
Mr. McCushen?
Well, I mean, they're simply going to transport it more efficiently and in larger quantities that are needed. It's a general cargo railroad with a passenger component to it. And it's a simple method of, you're flying stuff in or you're driving it in on a ice road. Heating is done through burning Bunsen burners and whatnot. And then food has to be flown in or driven on an ice road. So that's the result of the cost. That $8 bag of Doritos, probably $7 is fuel and transportation to get it up there. I mean, I'm good friends with an architect by the name of Douglas Cardinal, and he said Canada's north is not just third world, it's fourth world. And the only way we're going to alleviate these disparities is through economic parity. And if you don't have proper infrastructure going up north, you're never going to achieve economic parity. It's that simple. It's shocking. It's shocking. JP, do you want to talk about that?
I mean, I think you've hit it, Sean. At the end of the day, I mean, trains are great at reducing GHGs. Loads going up, you can put a lot more on a train than you can on a truck. Housing, I mean, from an Indigenous person's perspective, the ability to get snow machines and ATVs and those things that Northerners rely on for their way of life, I mean, that's going to have a major impact on the North as well. So, and I'm more of a salt and vinegar fan. So I'd like to see the price of those go down
Indeed,
as
Mr.
well.
Gladue. Thank you. I'm going to use my remaining 20 seconds to move the notice of motion I put on Tuesday, April 27th on 2021. So thank you to the witnesses that pursuant to Standing Order 1081A, an order of this committee do issue for a copy of all relevant documents relating to the agreement signed with ITC Holdings regarding the Lake Erie Connector, including but not limited to the agreement itself or correspondence between ITC Holdings and the CIB, any appendices, terms of repayment schedule, the bank's evaluation of the project, and any other relevant documents in an unredacted form within 20 days of the adoption of this order. Thank you, witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Cusi. Time has stopped, and we're going to go now to questions. Mr. Fillmore, I see your hands up. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Cusi, for that intervention. I've been thinking a lot about this motion, and it creates a few difficulties, and I'd just like to go through them and make sure that all members from all parties on the committee understand the challenges within the motion. Well, first and foremost, the motion is asking the Canada Infrastructure Bank to violate its own enabling legislation. The CIB Act has a section entitled Privileged Information, and that section lays out all of the it lays out that all information obtained by the bank in relation to project proponents or project investors is privileged, and that the CIB, in quotes, must not knowingly communicate, disclose, or make available the information or permit to be communicated, disclosed, or made available that information. So the CIB Act it's not a long act, and I encourage members to have a look at it if they haven't, but this particular section is laid out in detail because it's so important for an entity like the CIB to maintain the trust of investment partners, of project owners, that it will keep that commercially sensitive information confidential. This is potentially market moving information. So this act exists for a reason. So I think that the motion is kind of a non-starter just based on that, but there's a little bit more. The next point is that the investment agreement for the Erie connector is not yet finalized. This is the CIB has not reached its financial close with the proponent. It's not a done deal, and bringing this kind of uncertainty and exposure, this sort of political risk into a deal, it's just simply not responsible for our committee to undertake this. And in fact, many members of the committee, again from all parties, have said that they wish to see the CIB getting more deals going and more projects completed. And this motion would actually throw cold water on that and slow things down and erode trust, and I think, in the process. Third, members have also sometimes questioned the independence of the Canada Infrastructure Bank and have argued that the CIB needs to be fully independent so that it can get deals done free of political interference. And again, this motion is about political interference, isn't it? It goes against that argument. So to wrap it up, I'll go back to my first point. I don't think it would reflect at all well on our committee to pass a motion telling the CIB to violate its own legislation and in fact break the law when we don't really need to do that. There's a wonderful alternative that would respect the intention, I think, of Ms. Kuzi's motion, and I'll lay it out. It's very short, but in essence, it would be a simple amendment to the motion that presented by Ms. Kuzi, in which we would strike all the words after the first word, which is that, and replace them with the committee invite Aaron Corey, the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, to appear before the committee to discuss the Lake Erie corridor in full transparency and in open communication with this committee. So I'll hold my comments there. I'd love to hear what other members have to say.
Mr. Fillmore, as a clarification, are you putting that forward as an amendment?
I am, and I can
Okay.
repeat it if you'd like to.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. So we are going to now take questions on the amendment. So I do have a speaking order here. I do have Mr. Scheer. You're up next. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so just so I understand, we're now going to be debating the amendment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate Mr. Fillmore's comments. I would say that only the Liberal Party seems to view accountability and transparency as some kind of political interference. We have a situation where we have we're trying to get more information out of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. It's been a bit of a challenge to do so. I would view your proposed amendment as a wonderful suggestion as a separate amendment, and I would love to have Mr. Aaron Corey come back and he can speak to this, as well as some unresolved questions as to the bank's operations and to its mandates. I don't see the two as being mutually exclusive at all. And if the company involved, ITC Holdings, they wanted to keep their confidential secret, if they wanted to keep their operations confidential, if they wanted to keep their project proposals secret, if they don't want to divulge information, there are tons of lending institutions in Canada that provide that kind of service. They can go to CIBC, they can go to RBC. I'm sure that they're owned by a company called Fortis Inc. They have Fortis Inc. has had over $8.9 billion worth of revenue last year. They paid out over $800 million to shareholders just last year alone. I'm sure they have a wonderful relationship with financial institutions in Canada. And if they were looking for assistance to get this project built, there are a number of lending institutions that provide that kind of confidentiality. But when you go to government, when you look for government to provide that type of assistance, I believe it is essential that taxpayers know exactly what they're on the hook for. We have a situation here where the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, using taxpayers' dollars, has made an announcement. Not all the details are even provided on their webpage. And on this point, I'd just like to make a comparison. Okay. Sorry, I think someone's not on mute there.
Can everybody make sure that they're on mute, please?
Just a comparison between even the information that the bank has provided with the Réseau project in Montreal. At the very least, on the website for that project, they include the repayment schedule and the interest rate. On this project, we don't have that at all. So I don't believe at all, I don't accept at all for a second that providing this committee with the opportunity to go over how this decision was made. We're being told that the bank is supposed to use public money to leverage private dollars, and here we have a situation where it's the exact opposite. Private money seems to be leveraging public money. I believe it's eminently responsible for the bank to show this committee on what it based its decision to spend $655 million worth of taxpayers' money. So I'd be happy to hear what other members say on that, and reserve a right to come back if there is more discussion, Mr. Chair. So I'll lower my hand and raise it back up again. Hopefully I can respond to other points that are made.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. For the last couple of meetings, we spoke about the volume of work this committee has in front of us. And personally, I think we should be focusing on that work. We have witnesses here today on an important subject, and I think we shouldn't be wasting their time and hours on another motion. This committee has already questioned the minister on infrastructure about this very same project just last week. I'm not sure where the analogy is, what a comparison is CIBC and CIBC. That's like comparing apples to oranges. So I'm not sure exactly where the opposition coming from on that. That just makes no sense to me. But anyway, I just wanted to make those comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. We'll now go to Mr. Bachrach. You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And speaking directly to the amendment, I tend to agree with Mr. Scheer that it's a lovely amendment. It would make an even better standalone motion, perhaps with the timing coinciding with the arrival of the documents. This motion is really about transparency and accountability for the public dollars that are going into these projects. And the concerns around the structure of the infrastructure bank are now well known. They've been affirmed by the parliamentary budget officer, and we need more light on this issue, not less light. We need to understand exactly how these deals are structured, what the private investors are expecting to get out of it, and we need to do that on behalf of all Canadians. So I'll be voting against the amendment, and I certainly support the direction of the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. I'll now move on to Mr. Barceau-Duval. Mr. Barceau-Duval, go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the motion is concerned, I'm very interested in it. I was surprised to hear about that project, especially since, in my opinion, the Canada Infrastructure Bank funds were supposed to be provided for the public. So perhaps that will be explained in greater detail in the documents that will be submitted in due course. Now, based on the remarks that have been made thus far, it seems that we're already quite busy at this committee, but I don't think that calling for documents per se will hamper our committee's work. We're not going to have to do that. It'll be public servants that will be doing that on our behalf. So I'm not sure, unless Mr. Fillmore wants to put forward a separate amendment, well, he can do that, and I'd be very open to other amendments. Now, even though this is a topic that interests me a lot, we do have a meeting that was planned today. We have witnesses here with us, and I would like the opportunity to have the back and forth with them. So I'm wondering if my colleagues around the table could keep their remarks brief so that we can speak with our witnesses. I would have liked to have asked a bunch of questions, especially to one witness, and I've already not been able to do so in my first round, and I would really not like to miss out a second time round.
Thank you, Mr. Barceau-Duval. We're now going to move on to Ms. Jacek. Ms. Jacek, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And certainly I'm supportive of what Mr. Fillmore has suggested, because I'm particularly concerned about the issue of the unredacted form of what is being requested. As Mr. Fillmore has said, the way this is written, the motion is asking the CIB to violate its own enabling legislation. The CIB Act has a section entitled Privileged Information. And so how can we possibly expect them to violate that particular section of the Act? In essence, as I understand it, the deal has not yet closed. So it makes it even more difficult to request this kind of information at this particular time. And so, notwithstanding, I feel exactly the same as Monsieur Barcelou-Duval, that we have witnesses here. We were engaging in an extremely interesting conversation, but I think since this motion has been brought forward, we need to be extremely cautious about in any way suggesting that the documents should be unredacted.
Thank you, Ms. Jacek. Can members of the committee still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Chair.
thank you. Because I'm locking out here. I have no video, so I'm happy. So I'm kind of blind here, guys. I am now going to go back to Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, you got the floor.
Thanks, Chair, and I thank my colleagues for the thoughtful commentary. The fact remains that the motion is asking the committee to break the law, and I think we should all think long and hard about that. We've seen a string of motions and lines of attack over the past number of months from Mr. Scheer and his conservative colleagues that are blatantly political and looking to try to embarrass or degrade the ability of the CIB and, in fact, the entire infrastructure department to achieve its mandate. And that's what this is. This is, I mean, for a party who has been trying to embarrass the government, what better way to do it than to pass a motion that would throw cold water on investment through the infrastructure bank and prevent more projects from happening? It's a brilliant in its simplicity, but it's also terribly wrong. Okay, it's not just wrong; it's illegal. So I'm sorry that some of our more, that Mr. Bachrach, perhaps he is joining in the political theater with the Conservative Party, or perhaps he earnestly believes that this level of transparency would somehow be helpful in getting more infrastructure built. I can't assume the motive, but I'm very sorry that the motion is even on the table. However, it's clear from the comments, including Mr. Barcelou-Duval's comments, that there is an appetite among the opposition parties to break the law here and move forward in some way. So I'm going to try to mitigate that damage and follow along with what Ms. Jacek said. It's very important that in any production order, document production order that a committee like this undertake, that the order be consistent with the relevant legislation concerning confidentiality. So I'm going to be withdrawing my previous amendment and proposing an amendment to the original, and I can take some direction from the clerk or the chair on the orderly way to do that. But I'd like to ultimately get to a place where we amend the original motion to include this very specific language, that the production of documents be consistent with relevant legislation concerning confidentiality. And I'd also like to make an amendment that extends the patently unreasonable 20 days, where we have, in an era where we have committees working around the clock literally, and replace that with 60 days. And I'd like to hear from multiple parties on their appetite for those two amendments. Thank you.
Actually, if I could just jump in here for 1 second, it seems we've lost the connection with the chair. So I'm going to ask Ms. Kusi as vice chair. You can assume the chair and direct the debate at present, just for the edification of all members. We would need unanimous consent to withdraw an amendment. And then I guess we begin over with the new amendment. So Ms. Kusi, turn it over to you to.
Point of order. Since if I may just jump in, since Mr. Fillmore has proposed withdrawing his amendment, and since the first round of speakers to that amendment seemed to indicate that there wasn't much support for it, could we quickly dispose of that and see if there's unanimous consent just to allow him to do that?
Okay, so first of all, we're looking for unanimous consent, excuse me, for the withdrawal of the previous amendment of Mr. Fillmore. Are we in unanimous consent of that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Let me just, pardon me, I've had it on speaker view, so I'm just going to go to gallery so I can see all of the party representatives. Mr. Backrack, are you in consent of this? For your nodding head. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, then we will go to the second amendment of Mr. Fillmore. Clerk, can you please read the amendment of Mr. Fillmore once again so we can move to discussion?
Actually, I was going to request, if I could, Mr. Fillmore to repeat his wording, because I didn't quite get the whole amendment for that. And then for Ms. Vice Chair, if you'll see, there's the little hands are up.
I am looking at the hand. Thank you, Clerk.
So maybe if Mr. Fillmore could reread his amendment, and then you can just direct debate. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you.
Thank
Mr. Fillmore.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Clerk, for the help there. So I'm going to make sure I do this in two amendments. So the first amendment is to delete the words "in an unredacted form" from the original motion and replace them with "and that the production of documents be consistent with relevant legislation concerning confidentiality."
So that's your first amendment, Mr. Fillmore.
That's right.
Okay, and we will take these amendments one at a time then, I understand. So if I could please get a speaker's list for the first amendment of Mr. Fillmore, please. Mr. Rogers, I see you have your hand up. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Kuzi. And actually, I like the amendment, the second amendment there, and I was going to propose that we, if it's in order, that we would have these documents provided to the committee in both official languages, just to make sure that we have the both official languages covered off.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. If the chair will verify, I believe that all documents must always be provided in both official languages. If the clerk could verify, please.
Well, we would have them translated if they weren't received in both official languages. So
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will move then to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And obviously I disagree entirely with the way Mr. Fillmore has characterized this motion. I will give him the benefit of the doubt on the concerns that he may have about a third-party group, a private company, being told that certain aspects of the legislation would apply. And in that light, I'm trying to kind of consider whether or not I could support that. The concern I have is that we have seen in so many other committees and so many other instances that the government has used cover in that type of thing to prevent disclosure where disclosure is warranted, and kind of stretch the application and the meaning of that. And so I really do believe that it's very important that we have a clean motion here, because as it relates to the project, the types of information that would have been provided to the CIB would have been linked to the project. This is a private sector company. This is a company that is owned by Fortis Inc., which is a massive, I don't want to repeat myself, but I want members to appreciate the fact here that this is a company that clearly has a great credit rating, has strong revenues, and yet they have been offered this kind of a deal from the government. They've been given $655 million. We don't yet know exactly if that is a loan, Is that a loan at market rates? If so, why does the government have to be the one to offer that loan? We don't know if this is if there's some kind of a debt equity swap here. You know, there's lots of different tools that the investment community uses to structure these types of deals. We don't know the taxpayer exposure on this. We don't know the ownership structure going forward. So I'm inclined to be supportive of a motion that would be less restrictive. I look at what other committees have done, other committees when they're looking to get things that the law would allow for redaction. I think it's very important to hone in on that. Anytime a committee asks for unredacted information, it's because there are laws that allow the government to withhold that information from the public. And the whole purpose of having a motion calling for unredacted documents is to precisely say, look, committee needs to get to the bottom of this. And let me remind you, it was the government that wrote the Canadian Infrastructure Bank enabling legislation. I don't believe that it's appropriate to give that kind of cover to structure a $35 billion bank where this government wrote into the enabling legislation elements to prevent full disclosure and transparency. And I think my NDP colleague and my Bloc colleague put it very well when you talk about when these deals are structured between other levels of government where it's public infrastructure, where the public owns the asset or operates it. There's a great deal of disclosure because you've got provincial access to information legislation, you've got municipal, and you've got federal. And here we have a situation where it's exactly the opposite. So we would not protect the government of Quebec or the government of Ontario or the government of Saskatchewan from not having to fully divulge the information about its involvement in these projects. So why would we protect a private company?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clerk, I see Mr. Badaway has returned.
Thank you, Ms. Kusi, for jumping in there. My computer went off in its own little world, so I froze up. I apologize for that. With that, I see many hands up. I'm going to go to Mr. Fillmore next. That's who's on my list. I have Mr. Fillmore, Mr. Barso-Duval, Mr. Al-Curry. Is that proper? Ms. Jacek, you okay?
Chair, I would suggest that you skip me and come back to me at the end of the others that have their hand up, but I would like the opportunity when the other four have spoken.
And Mr. Chair, I was after Mr. Bachrach.
Okay, so Mr. Bachrach, Ms. Jacek, we'll go with you two first. Go ahead, Mr. Bachrach, you get the floor.
I share some of the concerns around redaction, and in this parliament, we've seen some concerning instances where documents were over-redacted. Perhaps a compromise would be to involve the law clerk in the process of reviewing the documents. That's something that I could support. But otherwise, I tend to agree with Mr. Scheer that having a cleaner motion makes more sense. And I would remind folks that there was a 2009 report by the Public Accounts Committee that said very clearly that a committee's power to call for persons, papers, and records is absolute. So, and that was a committee chaired by a Liberal. So I think getting these documents makes a lot of sense. It's going to get answers for Canadians, and it's something I support.
Ms. Jacek?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to go back to the issue of unredacted documents because Mr. Scheer was implying that somehow the government does the redaction. Clearly, redactions are done by our public servants, and they, of course, are non-partisan and neutral people who understand the provision of their legislation that they're working with, and for sure, they do what they are supposed to do. They are not influenced in any way by the government, by the minister. It is clear that they are simply putting their best effort into following what they are allowed to do. So I just cannot let that impugning of our wonderful public servants go. I'm fully supportive of Mr. Fillmore's amendment. And I think we should take this extremely seriously. I would just like to repeat that this particular deal is not yet closed. And to interfere with these sorts of demands at this point in time is just not reasonable. As far as I'm concerned, completely unreasonable.
Thank you, Ms. Jessic. Mr. Alcuri.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that out of respect to our witnesses, and particularly Mr. Régent Pourlier, who's from a remote region, that he deserves to have the opportunity to field questions and provide answers on issues of particular interest to us as members of Parliament from the province of Quebec. Now, I propose that we give our witnesses the opportunity to continue, and then we can come back to committee business thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Alcuri. Mr. Barrasso-Duval, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'd like to support my Conservative colleague, Mr. Scheer, regarding his concerns about the amendment that has been tabled. In the past, I had an opportunity to move motions requesting the production of documents, and on occasion, I have been very unpleasantly disappointed or surprised by the outcome. For example, a recent example when I made an ATIP request or a request for access for information and we didn't get the same documents that we were expecting. They were supposed to be exhaustive, and there were other requests where there have been confidential documents, but where over 80% was redacted. Now, I understand that some documents are confidential, but we need to be told exactly why they are and why such large swaths are being redacted. So I think that if there is sensitive information, well, that can be flagged and it won't be made public, of course. And I'd be perfectly comfortable with that approach. But I think for the benefit of Canadians and Quebecers, we should be making as much public as possible. That said, we have to work within a framework, and I trust my colleagues around the table. I think that transparency is the most important thing, and often the government has failed to be transparent. These are sizable amounts we're talking about here, so I just don't understand how they can justify not providing the accurate information that was spent using taxpayers' money. And I mentioned this earlier, and I'm seeing our time is running out very quickly. And I'm starting to wonder, Mr. Chairman, if we don't want to have some witnesses come back. One particular witness has barely had an opportunity to testify. Perhaps he should be able to come back to another meeting unless you decide to extend the duration of today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Barrasso-Duval. And extending today's meeting past the 5:35 mark, that's when we started, is not possible. I'm now going to move on to Mr. Fillmore. You wanted to speak at the end of the queue, so I'm going to go to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you got the floor. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to reply to Ms. Jasic's comments with the greatest of respect. I have a completely different perspective on this. Waiting until after a deal is signed and waiting until it's all signed, sealed, and delivered, and money is flowing would be too late. If indeed there's nothing to worry about here and everything it makes sense and is defensible for the government, well, then the project will proceed. And if there's something egregious, if there's some kind of questionable arrangement or some kind of drastically below market rate or something that as we've seen with other examples, we saw the $12 million go to Loblaws that this government gave to a multi-billion-dollar grocery company to replace their fridges. It was too late to do anything about it. The money was already spent. $50 million went to MasterCard to help MasterCard, a credit card company that makes billions of dollars off the backs of working Canadians who can't pay their full balances. So I would respectfully not just suggest, but insist that this is the type of thing that needs to be disclosed before it's too late. This committee provides oversight. This committee holds this minister to account, and this committee has a right to know what the government is intending to do. Too often, it's too late once these things are already all signed, sealed, and set in stone.
Mr. Fillmore.
Thanks, Chair. And look, to be absolutely clear, we have nothing to hide. And of course, that was the point of the original amendment to the motion, to have the CEO join us and answer any questions that you have. But with again, the fact remains here that we are asking the committee to break the law. It's politically motivated to encourage the CIB to experience trouble and to make it appear that it's failing. And I want to ask my other committee members, my fellow committee members, we're doing this. You're proposing to do this now to the Erie Connector group. Is REM in Montreal next? Is the Oneida Battery Project in Ontario next? Is the Southern Manitoba Fiber Project next? Who next will have to pull their pants down for this committee before we get a project built in Canada under the Canada Infrastructure Bank? There is a proponent on this, a witness on this call, who I'm sure would not want to undergo having their competitive financial information, their trade secrets revealed to satisfy a political appetite that is not in the least helpful to help Canadians recover from this pandemic economically, or to build the infrastructure in Canadian communities that needs to get built. This is a terrible waste of time, and this is a wonderful panel of witnesses, and I would have loved to have had a chance to talk to them about a progressive vision of Canada where we shift to active transportation and electrification of bus fleets, and the growing of a rebuilding of a rail program in the country, and shifting away from 20th century fuel sources to renewables. And I hope that we get a chance to come back and talk to them. But this very project that we're talking about, the Erie Connector, at its heart is about shifting to those greener energy sources and giving a chance for good, clean Canadian power to reach a wider market, help the country reach its emissions reductions targets, put Canadians to work. It's exactly what the CIB was intended to do. There is a law that governs the way that the CIB interacts with its proponents, and I think it needs to go into the record what the relevant section is. So I'm going to read that now. Section 28, privileged information. 28 sub 1. Subject to Section 2, all information obtained by the bank, by any of the bank's subsidiaries, or by any of the subsidiaries of the bank's wholly owned subsidiaries in relation to the proponents of, or private sector investments or institutional investors in infrastructure projects, is privileged, and a director, officer, employee, or agent, or mandatory of, or advisor or consultant to the bank or any of its subsidiaries, or any of the subsidiaries of its wholly owned subsidiaries, must not knowingly communicate, disclose, or make available the information, or permit it to be communicated, disclosed, or made available. This is the law, friends. 28 sub 2, authorized disclosure. Privileged information may be communicated, disclosed, or made available in the following circumstances. A, it is communicated, disclosed, or made available for the purpose of the administration or enforcement of this act and legal proceedings related to it. B, it is communicated, disclosed, or made available for the purpose of prosecuting an offense under this act or any other act of Parliament. C, it's communicated, disclosed, or made available to the Minister of National Revenue solely for the purpose of administering or enforcing the Income Tax Act or the Excise Tax Act. Or D, it's communicated, disclosed, or made available with the written consent of the person to whom the information relates. Nowhere in this motion, unamended motion, are we respecting that. And if I'm reading what's happening here, it's hard to tell from the confusing signals whether there is an appetite for the amendment, that the redactions, the production of documents, be consistent with relevant legislation concerning confidentiality or not. I certainly hope we wouldn't pass a motion that would disregard at the least that. Now, I ask for some common sense here and for us to step back and remind ourselves of what CIB is trying to do, what we're all trying to do, which is to invest in Canadian communities, rebuild community infrastructure for future generations, recover from a pandemic, put people to work, reduce GHGs, and increase the ability of equity-seeking groups that Ms. Sachs had talked about in her testimony, so that they can participate in an economic recovery as well. Please, let's have some common sense.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I have next Ms. Jacek. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to build on something that Mr. Fillmore has alluded to. Obviously, this project, its agreement in principle, it looks extremely promising in terms of what it might be able to achieve. And the Ontario Minister of Energy, the Honourable Greg Rickford, a former colleague, obviously, of many of the Conservatives, our colleagues here on this committee, has actually said when he heard that the announcement of the agreement in principle, he said, the Lake Erie Connector demonstrates the advantages of public-private partnerships to develop critical infrastructure that delivers greater value to Ontarians, connecting Ontario's electricity grid to the PJM electricity market will bring significant tangible benefits to our province. This new connection will create high-quality jobs, improve system flexibility, and allow Ontario to export more excess electricity to promote cost savings for Ontario's electricity consumers. So Minister Rickford was obviously extremely enthusiastic, and I think any possibility of producing documents in relation to this this deal, unredacted documents, could put the whole deal in great jeopardy. And I would think that this would be most unfortunate for all concerned. So I just want to bring that to the attention of our Conservative colleagues.
Thank you, Ms. Jacek. I now go to Mr. Rogers. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I agree with some of my colleagues in terms of what this motion is suggesting, and in violating our own, the CIB to violate its own act, asking them to do that really with this motion. When we talk about commercial confidentiality of its agreement and how we could possibly jeopardize this project, this negotiation apparently is not finished yet, it's ongoing, and how we as committee could inject ourselves into that kind of process, I think is quite frankly irresponsible. I think Mr. Fillmore has put forward an option that is worth considering in terms of the amendments that he's proposed. And so I certainly would speak in favor of the amendment, and certainly not in favor of the original motion as it was presented. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Scheer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just have to keep going back to the point that there are dozens and dozens of lending institutions that provide financing without the need to disclose to the public the arrangements. And Mr. Rogers, a few rounds ago, you said you didn't understand the comparison between the CIBC and the CIB. Well, the point I was trying to make was that if a company is worried about the public having access to its confidential and privileged information, then it can go to a traditional lender. It can go to any one of the chartered banks. There's all kinds of financing options out there for people. But if it goes to government, if it's asking Canadians if it's asking the government to forcefully reach into Canadians' pockets to give them money at either a preferential rate of interest or an extremely long repayment term or who knows what, we don't know. We're speculating here because we don't actually have the details. But the fact that they went to the government, that the government decided to do this, tells us that there's some type of advantage to the company. So that's the point I was endeavoring to make with that comparison. That for companies that are worried about the secrecy and confidentiality and privileged nature of what they've what their operations are, what their forecasts are. If there's, well, as I said, there's lots of options for them to go to. But if they choose to go to government, then I believe it's essential that we apply that level of accountability and transparency that we demand of other departments. You know, we can file access to information requests. We can get this type of information when it's the government of Quebec or the government of Alberta through their various access to information laws. That type of disclosure is important. I want to thank my NDP colleague, Mr. Baccarat, for bringing up the multiple examples of where committees have sent for papers, and specifically mentioned looking for unredacted information. Even in this Parliament, there have been some examples of that. Now, I know the minister used this point, and I heard it again in the last round, talking about the government of Ontario praising this project. Well, I've asked around, and it turns out that the government of Ontario has not committed a dollar to this project. So it's no surprise if this federal government is coming along and saying that they'll pay for this what would normally be considered a provincial project. It's odd to me. It's odd to me that if this is such a good project, then why does it need government money? If it's such a good project for Ontario, how come Ontario hasn't committed any dollars to it? Minister Rickford has praised the project. Well, perhaps I might too if I were in his shoes. If the federal government was going to do something that the provincial government has so far refused to do, then no surprise there that he appreciates the government of Canada stepping in and doing something that even it had evaluated was not in the interests of its taxpayers. So those are some of the questions that I struggle with. And just to go back to the question about the redaction and providing a loophole, I really do believe it's important for us. Someone, I think maybe Ms. Jacek or maybe Mr. Fillmore suggested, would we be doing this for every project that came through? Well, ideally, the government would not have written the legislation to keep these types of details secret. Ideally, the government would have written the legislation for the Canadian Infrastructure Bank at a time. I remind members that it passed this legislation at a time when it had a majority government, so it had the sole pen, the sole right of authorship of the legislation. But ideally, they would have written into the legislation more robust transparency and disclosure regimes. It chose not to. Now, this is really the first situation where we have a private sector company involved in a project with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has dispelled the notion that the Réseau project in Montreal and the Alberta irrigation project have private sector funds. He has dispelled that. He has concluded that the government's own definition of private sector and public sector means those two projects are ineligible. I think this is very timely to set the stage for accountability and disclosure. If private sector companies who are going to profit from these projects, this ITC Holdings no doubt has some way of recouping its investment and returning dividends to its shareholders. If they're going to benefit from that, they're going to be able to win approval of their board members and their shareholders by showing them how much money they're making on these types of projects. I believe it's eminently reasonable for them to explain to the Canadian taxpayer what's in it for them, what's in it for the taxpayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm now going to move to Mr. Alcuri. Mr. Alcuri, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned that there is the Canada Bank of Infrastructure wants to intervene when it comes to the structure of the bank itself. And I think that whether that might cause delays to projects. Let me give you the example of the REM project. That's a project that we care very much about here in Quebec. And the government has worked hard to convince other parties to take part in the funding of that project. Now, if that were delayed or not even completed, would that mean what in terms of job losses for Canadians and Quebecers? And if you look at the Ericonecker Lake project, I have the same concern. And I hope that this committee will take this very seriously. It's in Canada's interest, given the crisis that we are facing of COVID-19. We have to put the interests of our economy and fellow Canadians, Quebecers first. And Mr. Chairman, let me come back to my original proposal. Were the committee in agreement to give the Mayor of Sept-Îles the opportunity to take part in a discussion for at least a couple of minutes, well, then that would be wonderful because he deserves that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carey. I believe the mayor of Sept-Îles has departed, so I don't think we're going to have that opportunity, unfortunately. I am now going to move on to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Well, I am seeing that there are more and more hands being raised, and I think that there are a lot of people that have already had an opportunity to speak to this issue. I don't think there's a lot of new stuff coming up. I think we've all got a sense of what's being put forward by our colleagues, so I'd call for the vote as quickly as possible, please.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. I'm now going to move on to Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
I was going to propose an amendment to the amendment, but I agree with Mr. Barcelou-Duval that we should move along with the vote. I'm at a bit of a quandary here. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, if I can ask for your forbearance, I will propose an amendment to the amendment.
Why don't we hold off on that, Taylor, until we vote on this amendment? I see one more hand up, Mr. Iacono. My intent then is to go to the vote on the amendment. And then if you want to propose another amendment, we can do that. Does that sound good?
Okay, I'm just looking to seek a bit of a compromise here, Mr. Chair, that might move us along more quickly. Because
you can always move a stub amendment, but we only have like almost 14 minutes left in the meeting. 14 minutes left in the meeting.
A sub amendment. Okay.
You can do that, but I would prefer to keep it cleaner. I see Mr. Iacono, you got your hand up. Let's go to Mr. Iacono. Let's vote on that amendment, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Bachrach. Go ahead, Mr. Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. President. And yes, indeed, too, I move that we go to a vote. But I'd like to say that what's eminently unreasonable here today is that my conservative colleague was comparing in his tweet today the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to the commercial banks. The notions of basic economy seem to be confused in his mind. But I'm glad that the common Canadian, and he's smiling, I'm glad that the common Canadian is more resistant to misinformation. And this is what he continues doing, and was able to reestablish the facts for my colleagues' benefit that the CIB is actually there to invest in infrastructure in joint partnerships with private partners, and in no way is commercial profit part of its mandate. And I have to also add that in the last 5 years, you see so much infrastructures being built or being renovated that I've never seen before that for 10 years under the Conservative government. So I think it's time to stop misinforming the public and misleading the public and stick to the facts. Thank you, Mr. President, and I think it's time to move on to having these votes.
Thank you, Mr. Iacono. Back to Mr. Scheer. Go ahead.
Well, I was all set to move on to the question until Mr. Iacono decided to use his platform, so I'll just respond to that. This government was the one that claimed that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank would unleash 7-to-1, minimum 4-to-1, maybe even 7-to-1 private sector investment. We understand that there's lots of funding models where the government invests in infrastructure and does not expect to get a profit back. It was this government that structured it as a bank and told Canadians that they were going to get all this money back from the private sector to leverage these projects. When you look at the PBO report and you look at the department's own disclosure. They are losing money and they haven't completed a single project. I don't know why these Liberal members keep trying to make comparisons to the previous Conservative government that got the Asia Pacific Corridor projects built, that got the Building Canada projects built in communities all across this country, whose P3 model actually completed projects within a 4-year timeline. But all that to say, this is great material for debate on other things, Mr. Iacono. I think there's a willingness of the committee here to dispose of this amendment, and I suggest that we do that now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With no other questions or comments, Mr. Backrack, you have your hand up. I'm assuming for the another amendment.
That's correct,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. So I see no further hands up, no further questions, comments. I'm going to ask for a vote on the amendment, Mr. Clerk. That's going to be a vote that I believe you should take because it's going to be all over the place. So it'll probably be easier for you to take it versus me trying to count hands on 2 screens. So go ahead.
All right, so the vote is on the amendment of Mr. Fillmore. We'll start with Mr. Fillmore.
In favor.
Monsieur El Khoury.
In favor.
Ms. Jacek.
In favor.
Mr. Rogers.
In favor.
Monsieur Iacono.
You're on mute. Yeah.
In favor.
Mr. Cram.
Opposed.
Ms. Kusi.
Opposed.
Mr. Shipley.
Opposed.
Mr. Soroka.
Opposed.
Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Contre.
And Mr. Backrack.
I'm opposed.
5 yeas, 6 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We're now going to go on to Mr. Backrack. Mr. Backrack, go ahead to the main motion.
Okay, so I would like to propose a separate amendment. Just pulling it up here. Okay. I am going to. So I'm going to amend it by adding the words "and that the documents be reviewed for legality by the parliamentary law clerk." And I would also like to propose an extension to the timeline, extending it from 20 days to 30 days.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. Comments, questions to the amendment? I have Mr. Fillmore, and then following him, I believe Mr. Scheer. Go ahead, Mr. Fillmore. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Backrack, your amendment to have the documents reviewed, could you just repeat it, by the law clerk for legality? Was that it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I would love to hear from anybody on the committee whether or not this is tantamount to the previous amendment that we just voted down. I mean, I feel like it achieves the same purpose. If there is a different purpose at work here, I'd like to understand that. And secondarily, thank you for the extension of days. It's a move in the right direction, given the fact that this inordinate and extraordinary volume of documentation is going to have to be translated and then redacted and reviewed for legality. 30 days is an impossible ask of our excellent House of Commons staff and public servants. And I wonder if you might consider if we could get unanimous consent to amend that to 60 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I'll go along with the amendment first and then hear everybody's comments. And then Mr. Fillmore, I'll go back to your 60-day unanimous consent. So right now I have Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, go ahead.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate Mr. Fillmore's comments there. As I see it, what Mr. Bacharach's, the difference between the original amendment that Mr. Fillmore moved and Mr. Bacharach just proposed was who is the decider of what is redacted. And I would definitely support the move in that direction to take ownership of that on the parliamentary side and away from the bank itself. I believe it would. I think all of us, despite Ms. Jack's assertions, we understand how the redactions process work, but I think we would all have a little bit more comfort knowing that it was the parliamentary law clerk doing it. I think 30 days is a reasonable compromise. I think 60 is awfully far off into the future, and they say a week can be a lifetime in politics. I can certainly attest to that, and the sooner the better. I wouldn't want to have it delayed so long that there's a risk that we may not ever get them back. And I would just maybe want to suggest, and the other point I would make on that is, surely the documents must be readily available. The government just made this, the bank just made this decision. We're not asking them to go back 10, 15 years into the archives and send someone down with a flashlight. These should all be readily available to them. So all we're asking them is to give it to the parliamentary law clerk. Parliamentary law clerk can go through what should and shouldn't be redacted as the translators go through their process. And I think 30 days is eminently doable. I was wondering though on the scope. I might suggest to Mr. Bacharach maybe have some time to chat, as I know we're coming to the end of our meeting here. But is there a way that we could maybe narrow the scope a little bit on the lens that the law clerk would look at that? I'm looking at examples of other committees where they have passed motions where the documents come to the law clerk and then they kind of give a few filters or a few instructions to the law clerk, protecting private information or things like that. And if the goal, if we give Mr. Fillmore the benefit of the doubt, saying, look, he really doesn't want to put these companies in positions where they've opened up their kimono on things that they might not ever have expected to go public. And is there a way that we can maybe give some guidance to the law clerk? Because what I don't want to have happen is to say, well, the law says privileged, confidential, and so the law clerk will have to look at that, and there may be information on the bank side that there's no need to protect. There's no interest in this committee to protect because the bank is a public institution and should be open and public. And so anyway, I'm just kind of throwing it over to you, Mr. Bacharach, about the possibility of maybe adding a little bit of some filters or lenses around what we would be asking the law clerk to base his redactions on.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're now going to move on to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, when we talk about time frame, 30 days, 60 days, I'm just wondering if we're going to have documents provided in both official languages. I'd like to hear from the clerk as to what kind of a time frame might we be looking at in order to be able to provide documents that would have to be translated into two official languages.
Mr. Clerk.
Entirely depends on how many documents. It's the question, how long is a piece of string? It depends how many pages of documents we receive. Depends if the documents are provided in both official languages, which they often are from departments, although this is not a government department, but it's operates sort of in the Official Languages Act anyway. So again, once again, it just depends on how many documents we receive.
Mr. Rogers.
Sorry, Chair. So, yeah, in the case of documents, then we don't know really if 30 days would be adequate or not, or 60 days, Mr. Clerk. And so, yeah, I support Mr. Fillmore in terms of suggesting that we would go to a minimum of 60 days.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm now going to move on to Ms. Jasek. Ms. Jasek, you have the floor.
Well, I guess I'm just concerned a little bit about the workload of the law clerk in terms of obviously this is not in their usual scope of activities, and they obviously have normal responsibilities that fulfill. Clearly, why we normally have redactions done by subject experts, people totally immersed in the subject matter that they're looking at so that they can truly appreciate where confidentiality is extremely important, where there is privileged information and so on. So I have a concern on that front, and therefore, to echo Mr. Rogers to a certain extent, in terms of the time frame, is it reasonable for a law clerk to fulfill this responsibility within a relatively short period of time? I would certainly think it might be more reasonable to give more time, to consider something like the 60-day time frame, because I'm sure this would be an additional and onerous responsibility.
Thank you, Ms. Jasek. I'm now going to go to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you got the floor.
Thank you very much. And, this is an eminently reasonable committee. I'm sure that if we were getting close to the end of the 30-day period, if the law clerk or if the translation services came to the committee and just said, look, there are so many documents here, we can't manage the workload, I would certainly support hearing that and would be inclined to support a reasonable request for an extension so that the law clerk or the translation services don't find themselves past the deadline. But if we say 60 days, they'll take 60 days. If we say 30 days, it'll more likely it will take 30 days. And so I'd far rather prefer giving a shorter time frame with the understanding that a good faith request for an extension based on real circumstances would obviously be entertained by reasonable people, especially if they came to someone of if they came from someone of such stature as the law clerk. So and just to talk back about the redactions and this, there are confidentiality agreements with lots of arrangements with government, lots of legislation that now enables us governments to use that as an excuse not to provide details. And it's essential that committees, when they feel that it's important enough to send for these types of papers, that we assert our parliamentary supremacy on that. We're not talking about contracts between two private individuals or two private entities. We're talking about a contract with the government. We've seen this government with other scandals where we've had to ignore some of those confidentiality agreements. We've had to use the committee power to compel that to shine a light on some of the scandals that this government is embroiled with. Not to suggest that anybody at ITC or anybody at the Canadian Infrastructure Bank has done anything like that so far, but if these types of crown corporations, if these type of government agencies, if they know that Parliament and committees will not hold them accountable down the line, that could be very detrimental to sound management of these things. So that is why we proposed, the Conservatives proposed this motion to begin with, to send for them in an unredacted form. I believe that Mr. Bacra has introduced a good faith effort to try to take into account some of the more reasonable concerns of Mr. Fillmore, and I'm hopeful that we can find some wording around that everyone on the committee can support.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We have come to the end of the meeting. I am going to allow, because there's no more hands up, the vote to happen on the amendment. And then with that, my intent is to adjourn the meeting. And of course, from there, Ms. Kusi would have to bring a motion up to resume debate at the next meeting. So with that,
sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair, if I may. I don't mean to. I don't mean to. Well, I guess I do mean to interrupt because I interrupted. But I had we were kind of chatting through the committee about providing some language around Mr. Backrack's proposal to involve the law clerk, And I believe there may be a member. I'm not a formally subbed in member of this committee at this point, so I'm not able to move a sub amendment to do that. So I wonder, given the time, if we just because I don't know what the rules are allowed, if this amendment is defeated because we don't yet have a full agreement on how the law clerk's involvement would be structured, would that prevent a further amendment to be brought in that may have that kind of clarity? So my suggestion would be to either just adjourn the meeting now and allow those conversations to happen, or maybe give some clarity that if this amendment is defeated, that it doesn't preclude another crack at it.
Two things. One, the motion belongs to the committee. It's on the floor. And to that, if this motion doesn't pass, if it does or doesn't pass, regardless, another amendment can actually be presented at a different time. That different time would be at the next meeting when the motion is actually brought back up to resume a debate. Does that clarify your
Yes.
thoughts? Or,
yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Backrack, you have your hand up. We're running out of time. I'd like to go to the vote on the amendment. Did you have any further comments?
I hear you, Mr. Chair. Procedurally, I'm a little bit confused as to why we're going to vote on the amendment and not on the main motion. But if that's the way it's going to go, that's at your discretion.
I have to vote on the amendment so that if it does pass, then the main motion would be amended. Then that's what we'd be actually voting on when we get to the main motion, is an amended main motion.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. So, Mr. Clerk, if we can call the vote on the amendment.
Mr. Fillmore,
Opposed.
Mr. El Khoury,
Contre.
Ms. Jacek,
Against.
Mr. Rogers,
Against.
Mr. Iacono,
Contre.
Mr. Cram,
Opposed.
Ms. Kusi,
Opposed.
Mr. Shipley,
Opposed.
Mr. Soroka,
Oppose.
Mr. Barcelou Duval,
Pour.
and Mr. Backrack.
I'm for the amendment.
Thank
9
you.
nays, 2 yeas.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And thank you, members of the committee. We had a very robust discussion there today. I do apologize to the witnesses or for those that are left for the time, the last half an hour. Hopefully we can get the witnesses back at a different time. But to that end, members, I do now adjourn this meeting. Have a great evening.